It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.
Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from China, from the literally ancient city of Kashgar on the old Silk Road, in the province of Xianjiang. It is the land of 1,000 lies, some of which we will debunk this evening. We'll be talking about China, we'll be talking about Russia, Ukraine, the United States, and the state capture by the Israel lobby of all of the important institutions in Britain. And if we have time, we'll be talking about British and American domestic politics too. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Let me take the trash out first. Our guest on MOATS just 3 nights ago was arrested in a performative pantomime by the Metropolitan Police, even though she doesn't live in London. They travelled all the way from London to Bristol and arrested her for speech, arrested her for Twitter, arrested her for things said many months ago in the summer at a public rally in the capital city of London. Our good doctor was due to face the General Medical Council just the next day. And, of course, these two things are connected. As she told us in her interview today on the mother of all talk shows, this was double jeopardy. She'd already beaten that had been brought against her by supporters of the Israel lobby, and now they were intending to try her again. And just in case there was any doubt about the outcome, well, they sent the Metropolitan Police to do their dirty work. They handcuffed a British Palestinian general practitioner, hospital doctor in the National Health Service, was handcuffed over tweets that she had issued. It is not yet the end, but it's getting there. The twilight is upon us. Britain's state capture is virtually complete, except in one regard. That was the decision by the police in Birmingham to recommend that the opposing fans of maccabitelaviv not be permitted to attend their upcoming European tie with the Birmingham Premiership side Aston Villa. And now we know what basis they had for making it. The rest of us who follow these things already knew, but the Birmingham police had studied carefully the video footage of the rampage, the riot, which had been caused by the Tel Aviv fans at the European tie in Amsterdam last year. One that was treated in the initial stages by the British media as some class of pogrom, turned into the revelation of complete complicity and guilt on the part of the Maccabi-Tel-Aviv fans. Maccabi, for British football fans, are like Millwall in the 1970s, but on acid. These are people who rampage around towns looking for anyone who looks like they might be a Muslim and savagely beating them. But they don't just beat people who are Muslims. Just after the British Prime Minister intervened against the Chief Constable of Birmingham and instructed the Chief Constable to find a way to allow the Maccabi fans to travel to England, the very next night, the derby game with hapoeltelaviv and maccabitelaviv had to be done before it even began because of violent riots started by the racist thugs of Maccabitelaviv. The police authorities in Lviv, in Israel, cancelled the game because they feared that loss of life was all but inevitable. This left the British government with a considerable degree of egg upon their faces. They had intervened on behalf of the Maccabi supporters and their right to travel to England, but the Chief Constable of Tel Aviv would not allow the game to proceed because of the racist violence against other Jews being practiced on the terraces. You might have thought that that would be the collapse of Stout Party. You might have thought that the British government would swiftly walk this back, as they say in the United States. But no, they doubled down instead. They told the Chief Constable to tell them just exactly what it would require to take order, whatever the price, whatever the cost, they would meet it. I don't know if they had in mind deploying the British Army in the circumstances. I do know that Birmingham is a city where the bins haven't been collected for many, many months because the city cannot afford, they say, to meet the demand of the refuse collection workers that their wages should not be cut. Not for a wage increase, but to stop their wages being cut. Birmingham say they cannot afford to meet that legitimate demand. Although they've spent more on trying to break the strike than they would have if they had honoured the men's demands. So state capture is not yet quite everywhere in Britain. But on issues like Gaza, where our flag fluttered today next to Jared Kushner in his press conference in Tel Aviv, where Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, announced his plans for Palestine, announced his plans for the governance of the people of the Gaza Strip, What the British flag was doing there, I'm not yet clear. But it was the American flag, the Israeli flag, and the British flag. So the British are back in Palestine. They were there in the 12th century for the Crusades, and they were there during the First World War. The war graves in Gaza, which include the remains of one of my distant relatives, long buried in Gaza from 2017, a very auspicious year in the history of Palestine, buried there and kept impeccably by the Palestinian authorities, but largely now destroyed in the murderous rampage of Benjamin Netanyahu over the last 2 years. We were, of course, occupation of Palestine by the time of the end of the First World War, but before we were in occupation of it, we'd already given it away in the Balfour Declaration when we promised it on behalf of one people to a second people, although the land belonged to a third people. But it no longer appears to belong to that third people, even though international law insists that Gaza is distinct, a part of the two-state solution agreed in the Oslo Accords and given the force of international law by the adoption of those accords by the United Nations Security Council. The maps are very clear. As a matter of fact, when I looked at the maps today, the events on October 7th, 2 years ago, actually took place in Gaza, not in Israel. That's right. The music festival was in Gaza. That's right. The kibbutzim that were attacked were in Gaza. They were not in Israel, as is recognized by international law. But the territory of Gaza is a very clear and legally distinct entity, and it is a part of the two-state solution, but no longer. The two-state solution is literally untenable. It's untenable anyway, politically, because of the announcement of 22 new Israeli settlements on the West Bank, where 800,000 illegal settlers already live. Netanyahu is pledged to double the number of illegal Israeli settlers on the West Bank over the next few years. That in itself renders the two-state solution untenable. But it's even more untenable when you take Gaza out of it. And Gaza is now well and truly out of it. Jared Kushner, who hopes to make a very considerable killing on the real estate opportunities on the beachfront property of Gaza, although who would want to buy a condominium on top of all those bones, on top of all that blood, on top of all those corpses, on top of all that toxicity, on top of the 3 Hiroshima bombs worth of munitions that were dropped, tiny piece of land? I have no idea, although actually I do have an idea the kind of people that they would be. But they would certainly not be Palestinians. They would certainly not be the people whose land it was being built on. And anyway, they don't go to casinos or bordellos, at least not at home. So we are in a situation now where the British, presumably in deference to the colonial governor, Tony Blair, who has still not been ruled out of the role of the British potentate in the Gaza Strip on behalf of his boss, Donald Trump. But I think if I was in Parliament, I'd be asking tomorrow exactly why the British flag was there. Certainly not pursuant of any decision made by the British Parliament, but the British Parliament is in any case increasingly farcical, a rubber stamp assembly where a government with a massive majority but no support at all in the country is doing whatever it likes, or rather whatever Israel likes. Now, will they, won't they go to Budapest? I've been to Budapest. It's a very lovely place, and I can think of nowhere better for peace to be hammered out between Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin. We were told that Marco Rubio and Sergei Lavrov, the two foreign ministers of the two states, would have a telephone call and pre-negotiations, I suppose you'd call them, earlier this week, and that happened and seemed to go perfectly well. And then the dogs started yapping. Poland, first of all, said that it would force President Putin's plane to land if it flew over Polish airspace. It had no intention of doing so, but this malignant and, of course, totally ridiculous threat was issued, showed the attitude of the European Union, chihuahuas and poodles and dachshunds and toothless bulldogs, if you count the ex-member of the European Union, the United Kingdom. That was their attitude to peace being brokered between President Trump and President Putin. Others said that Hungary would be punished if it did not arrest Vladimir Putin when he arrived for a summit meeting with the American President Donald Trump. Now, I know these are all ridiculous, performative postulations because, of course, if Poland shot down the President of Russia's plane, Poland would be glass within 12 minutes. Poland would cease to exist, and every Polish person would be dead because shooting down the President of the Russian Federation, a nuclear-armed superpower, well, would be a pretty silly thing to do. If Orban, having invited Trump and Putin to have their peace summit there, proceeded to arrest them on pain of being punished by the European Union, well, of course, the same would happen to Hungary, and we would be into World War III. Now, there's a remarkable insouciance about that. I understand it. I tripped this phrase off my tongue, and I realized that it doesn't have the impact on the audience that it should do. On this day in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis began. And for those of us who were alive at the time, the prospect of a nuclear war between the then Soviet Union and the United States of America was both absolutely real but absolutely terrifying. We all went to our beds in a state of fear and alarm. But this crisis that we're facing today is more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis, and nobody seems to give a toss. There are no demonstrations about it. You can get a demonstration at the drop of a hat, quite rightly, over the situation in Gaza, but you try getting anyone even to raise in Parliament the danger of nuclear war that we are facing. You will not find it. No protests, no demonstrations, no evident fear and alarm. And I mention Britain again because today Ukraine fired British Storm Shadow missiles deep into Russia. Now, what could possibly go wrong? I don't know what targets were hit. I don't know if the missiles were intercepted. I'm really quite far from the madding crowd right now. But if anything significant was hit by a British Storm Shadow missile in Russia, Russia would be perfectly entitled to retaliate against the United Kingdom in a way that ineluctably would lead to nuclear war. Of course it would. Nuclear weapons is the only thing the British have got. They don't have an army. They don't have a navy. Their ships are held together by glue, and nobody wants to join the British Army. And if they conscript people into the British Army, well, I assure you that we will do everything possible to throw as many spanners into those works as is possible. So we've only got nuclear weapons. So if Britain suffered a retaliation from Russia over these Storm Shadow attacks deep inside Russian territory, well, what else are we going to do but fire nuclear weapons back? I don't think People are as fully seized of the danger of this moment as they should be. And so instead of praying earnestly that the talks in Budapest do go ahead and are successful, and that we see an end to this devastating war, which has cost the lives of well over 1 million people and has cost the treasure of all of us to the tune of trillions of dollars, euros, and pounds. Instead of praying for this summit and for it to succeed, our governments are doing everything that they can to try and wreck any opportunity for an end to the Ukraine war. It's a kind of madness. I confess I don't fully understand it, why bankrupt countries are ruining their own economies for a war, the outcome of which can only be a victory for the vastly superior Russian armed forces. Which leads me to China, from where I'm broadcasting now. On this day in 1633, the Chinese Navy defeated the Dutch East Indies Company in an epic naval battle, the biggest ever naval encounter between China and the European powers at that time, the Battle of Liaolu. The Chinese won. Yeah, the Chinese Navy whipped the mighty Dutch East Indies Company in 1633 on this day. What happened last week? To get their retaliation in 400 years later, the Dutch stole a Chinese microchip company. They stole it. They kicked the Chinese off the board and replaced them with a Dutchman. I'm not making this up. China immediately retaliated and said, "You've stolen our company, but we send billions of chips to Europe, to that company, and we will do so no longer. So you've stolen our company, but it now has nothing to do, because we will not give it the chips." And this has immediately, within 3 days, caused the German car industry to begin to shut down. Volkswagen have begun to close down their assembly lines because Volkswagen cannot build its cars without the chips that China was sending to its own company in the Netherlands and were then distributed across the motor car industry throughout Europe. You see, you throw a pebble in a pond, it becomes a tidal wave, and that tidal wave may sweep you all away. Much more of that coming up, because this is the mother of all talk shows. My grandson Sean, who's answering the phones tonight, had his first 1 million view tweet about Gaza, and I predict great things from him. So we're not going to go away. We believe in the next life. We believe that we will all be judged on what we did in this life, and that will determine our fate. And so we face whatever we have to face, if not with equanimity. Can't say that the experience was one that one can feel sanguine about. It was genuinely horrific, and I'll never forget it. It was the more horrific for being unexpected by me. I never believed that someone like me, of my age, and with my background and with my position in British politics, would ever be told that I was being held under the Terrorism Act. I'm not unmoved by it, but I'm certainly undeterred by it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now you may think it's a mere bagatelle compared to what's been talking about, but the poll tonight is, should Prince Andrew have his title removed? His bollocks removed would be a more appropriate outcome, given the venality of his behaviour over seems to have been almost 2 decades, when he was cavorting with the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, otherwise known as the Mossad's man in New York City. Prince Andrew is now shamed to the point of no return. The book posthumously published by one of his victims, Victoria Giuffre. There he is there in the Pizza Hut on the south coast of England. The Victoria Giuffre revelation about not Prince Andrew but an unnamed Prime Minister, I wonder what that could be, who raped her, who sexually abused her, who took advantage of her youth and her vulnerabilities. It's almost impossible to believe, but Prince Andrew is still called a prince. Now, frankly, there are no princes or kings for that matter in my vocabulary, but Prince Andrew is still a prince of the royal house and is still living the life of Riley at public expense. So the poll is asking, should Prince Andrew have his title removed? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, or on my X, or on the community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you are watching on the YouTube stream, please don't forget to like the show. Give it a, I notice that not that many people do that compared to the numbers who watch it on YouTube. Forget that. These things all help in our ceaseless struggle with Mr. Algorithm. So give a thumbs up to the show and make sure, of course, that you are subscribed. Or you can vote, if you're in the vanguard, on my Patreon page, patreon.com/George Galloway. If you are amongst the elite core who support the show through Patreon, you can also vote. Now, if you want to call the show, the numbers are this. It's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Now, my good friend Jackson Hinkle, the most impressive 20-year-old man since I was 24 years of age, is enough in us now. He's the US-based political analyst and host of Legitimate Hits, which is a must-watch, by the way. Jackson Hinkle joins me now. Jackson, thank you for doing so. So much to discuss with you. If I may start with China. You're one of the leaders of the American Communist Party, and your leader, Haz al-Din, is in Beijing now. Perhaps I'll meet him on my return to the capital. Seems all roads are leading to China, and that's for a reason, isn't it? The Webbs wrote about the Soviet Union in the late 1920s. I have seen the future and it works. It didn't work as well as we'd hoped, at least by the end, but China definitely works. I mean, experience that I'm having, and I'm sure your comrade Haz al-Din is having the same experience, if not more so, is that kind of miracle. You actually can hardly believe your eyes when you see the advance that China has made in just 40 years. taking 800 million people out of poverty and paving the country with high-speed rail, 50,000 kilometres of it so far, when the United States has made precisely 0 kilometres of high-speed rail, and Britain has made a bit of a hash of the miles or so we had in mind. What does China success mean to you and people of your political persuasion?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show again. I do have to start off by regrettably informing you I'm getting old. I'm 26 now, if you can believe it, not 20. So I the gray hairs are about to start coming in. And I hope you're having a great trip in China. My comrade, my chairman, Haz al-Din, is there, the chairman of the American Communist Party, as you mentioned. He was going around to several very important events like you, and he took a tour of the historic Peking University. He received an authentic copy of William Z. Foster's letter to Mao Zedong. This was presented to him by the party, I believe, in China. So that was a very, very great honor for us American communists. William Z. Foster means so much. And as for the success of China, I mean, look, China, as you know, is leading in every single critical manufacturing sector, industry sector. Their annual energy production is far outpacing the United States, which is an indicator for healthy and happy human life. Because when you have more energy that you can produce each and every year, it means that the quality of living is going to be higher, goods are going to be cheaper. And this is what we're seeing in China. As you mentioned, 840 some odd million people been lifted out of poverty over the last 40 or so years. China is also reforesting their entire country. They're planting like 2 major new forests right now that are the size of Ireland. They've already reforested a great swath of their country. Their transportation is incredible. 50% of Teslas are made in China, over 50%. Their domestic manufacturers of cars are doing really well. In military defense technology, they are also outpacing the United States right now, despite the fact that China is not actively really engaged directly or as a proxy in any conflicts in the world, unlike the United States is. China's success is absolutely unprecedented. Their GDP by purchasing power parity outpaces the United States by something like $5 trillion each and every year, and it's growing and growing and growing. So all I've got to say is communism is here. Of course, this is communism adapted to Chinese tradition, Chinese history, just as we see communism in Korea is Juche communism there. This is communism with Chinese characteristics or Confucian characteristics. And what I think we need to do as Americans or as Brits is take a note out of the book of China, stop focusing on the mundane issues that CNN and Fox News want to preoccupy us with about genders and bathrooms and crazy things like this. We need to focus on rapidly industrializing the forces of production while at the same time making sure that we accommodate for the needs of our people. And that starts with ending the cycle of U.S. imperialism. That starts with closing down foreign military bases. And it starts with ending all these foreign wars, which I guess we're about to get some new ones, maybe Venezuela, maybe Colombia. We got airstrikes on citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We got, it's crazy what's happening right now. We're going in the wrong direction. But China, what it means for me is it gives me hope as an American that we can make our country much better.
It's an obvious segue to the fact that the peace president, who had the remarkable achievement today of being presented with the Richard Nixon Prize for Peace, satire died all over again. He might be Richard Nixon's idea of a man of peace, but not many others. Having boasted about bringing peace to the Middle East with his Gaza peace deal, that peace deal now lies in ruins, in flames, in fact, having said that he didn't want war with Iran. The commanders of the Iranian are all in bunkers this evening, expecting any moment an attack by the United States proxy Israel. The bombing of anyone, I don't know who they are. They might be drug dealers. They're much more likely, given the distance between Venezuela and Miami and the kind of that they're sailing, much more likely to be fishermen. But the point is, nobody's asking who they are. The United States is just murdering them in plain and boasting about it on White House notepaper. They threatened Colombia this week, having earlier deported the president of Colombia for a speech he gave whilst attending the United Nations in New York. And of course, they say they've told their allies that they are actually going to invade Venezuela. Good luck with that, I say. I've seen Venezuela. I've seen the size of Venezuela. I've seen the mountains of Venezuela. There'll be a guerrilla war there for 30 years if the United States invades it. But they seem determined upon war after war.
Yep. I mean, just to hit those all real quick, you look at Gaza, there's been over 100 Gazan civilians killed since the ceasefire began within an 11-day stretch, or 10-day stretch, rather. Airstrikes and snipers taking these Gazan civilians out. Not much of a ceasefire. As for the aid that was supposed to go in Gaza, there's supposed to be 6,600 trucks that were supposed to have entered Gaza by October 21st, yesterday, but only 983 trucks have entered into Gaza. Okay, so this is, instead of 660 trucks per day, we're getting 89 trucks per day, something like that. The Gaza ceasefire is an absolute mess. They're making Trump, Vance, everyone look like the clowns that they are. Vance is supposed to be in Israel right now to be making sure that the Gaza ceasefire is fully implemented once more after these airstrikes. But what did Vance get welcomed to in Israel today? The Knesset just approved the full annexation plan of the West Bank. Just moments ago, they announced this. As for Venezuela and Colombia, these fishermen, I mean, the United States, if they were drug dealers, they would have taken the surviving members of these boats and they would have taken them to the United States and prosecuted them. But the truth is they had to repatriate them back to Colombia because they realized, oh, shoot, these are actually fishermen, as the Colombian president told us that we've been airstriking. And we're going to get into a really dicey legal issue internationally if we try to bring these Colombian citizens into our country and prosecute them over who knows what. I don't know. I agree with you. This is going to be America's Vietnam or possibly worse. The People's Militia in Venezuela is 1 million plus strong. They are strong defenders of the Second Amendment, as we say in America. They're all armed to the teeth. And it is going to be, yes, a prolonged guerrilla war, but it is also going to be very, very chaotic and deadly. And for anyone in the United States who thinks that we're just going to do decapitation strikes, come in and bring our oil companies to the border of Guyana and Venezuela, they should really take a serious look at how much chaos is actually going to ensue if they do something like that. And that chaos will not be able, that fire won't be able to be put out. It's going to be raging for a very long time.
And of course, the consequent flow of refugees arriving at the border, they'll not be stopped by Trump's wall.
No. But I mean, that's okay for big business in the United States because the Koch brothers infamously were major supporters of mass migration into the United States, despite the fact that they are conservative, legacy brand in the United States. Capitalists love mass migration. They support it because it gives them cheap labor for their enterprise. So I wouldn't be surprised if they secretly support that sort of stuff.
Finally, Jackson, the big enchilada for me at least, I think for you too, is the Ukraine war between NATO and the Russian Federation. There seems some doubt as to whether Budapest is going to happen, and bigger doubt that if it happens, there is the will to meet what must be Russia's minimum terms, because Russia has made huge sacrifices in every respect in this conflict, and they're not going to call it off with most of their war aims unfulfilled. So we have, even if it happens, the basis of another failure to agree and the war dragging on. How does it look to you?
Well, frankly, the U.S., Ukraine, they've run out of cards, as we all know. About every day or every other day, there are major missile and drone strikes currently taking place in Ukraine. Russia is sending 400 to 600 drones at a time in these swarms. Last night was a huge attack on Ukraine. There were blackouts all across the country. And, this is not happening out of the blue. Ukraine began attacking petrochemical plants, oil refineries in Russia, and they celebrated it. And now they're very upset that Russia is responding. But the blackouts happening in Ukraine, the energy blackouts, aren't even due to the single strike that took place last night or 2 nights ago when Ukraine admitted that 24 missiles penetrated all of their air defenses. Not a single missile was stopped. These blackouts are happening, as I understand, because of the months and months and months, years and years of very, very, very well-coordinated attacks, strikes that have been followed up by drone attacks the next night. This is an art that Russia has perfected. And now you just have sweeping blackouts all across the country right before winter because these energy grids are frankly unable to be repaired. A lot of people estimate that Russia very soon will have the capability to launch drone swarms of 1,000 plus drones at a time. It's not getting any better for the Ukrainians. They're talking about Tomahawks. Tomahawk missiles are primarily fired off of Navy ships. So I don't know what Ukraine, thinks that they're going to do with the Tomahawks. Of course, they can utilize them from land, but it's not what they're designed for. To think that this would be a silver bullet is ludicrous. I think the Tomahawks were an effort to try and get Putin to come to the negotiating table, but there's nothing to negotiate. Russia has the territory they have. Everyone knows they're not going to give it up. Maybe the Washington Post doesn't. Washington Post says that Trump wants Putin to give up Kharkov and Zaporozhye. Never going to happen. The truth is Trump needs to wipe his hands clean and leave Zelensky out to dry. Whatever happens will happen.
He does seem to want to do that until the next day when he seems to backtrack. Is this just the eccentricity, to put it its kindness, of the personality of your president? Or are people leaning on him? Or is he deliberately deceiving one side or the other?
I think there's a fair bit of deception at play with both sides. I think he sees himself as this negotiator, as we all know. I think that he is heavily influenced by the last person he spoke to, who has some medals on their uniform. But the truth is, why this has lasted for so long is because Trump literally has zero options. All of the options that General Kellogg provided to him, at the start of the administration with their neocon think tanks, they've all been rejected. Trump understands it's not going to be accepted. J.D. Vance's slightly better peace proposals also rejected. Rick Grenell, who had the best ones, has ostensibly been forced out of the Trump administration, it looks like, because he happened to go meet with President Maduro at the start of the administration, and that really upset Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. So our best voices are seemingly getting forced out of the administration, and Trump has no option. So he's floundering like a fish out of water. He doesn't know what to do. And the answer is right under his nose. It's very simple. Make peace with Russia. There's nothing else to do at this point. Why would you put all your eggs in the basket of Europe? Europe is crumbling. It's a dying horse. Make peace with Russia.
You think Budapest is going to happen?
I don't know if it'll happen. I think it's possible it happens, but there's this idea that's been floated, I've seen discussed about Trump and Putin flying on the same jet into Budapest. And I think that would probably safeguard anything from happening to President Putin, anyone trying to down his plane. It's really crazy. Poland apparently has a military to challenge all of Russia now, I guess. So we're getting these strong statements from him. But I think that Russia, honestly, probably after the Alaska summit, there's probably not too much more new information that is going to be presented by Trump in these in-person meetings. Maybe, we don't know. But judging by the public statements that we've seen since the Alaska summit, we've seen Trump go out and say tomahawks for Ukraine, long-range missiles for Ukraine. I mean, it doesn't look like publicly the situation's getting better. So if Putin has to make a life or death decision as to whether or not he's going to go, if I was him, I'd say, well, why would I go to this? We're winning. They just entered Krasny Liman. We're about to be into winter. That heavily benefits the Russians. Their drone and missile strikes are performing quite well. I don't see why Russia would risk anything at this moment for the sake of Trump or his ego.
Jackson Hinkle, the most impressive 26-year-old since I was 26. Thanks for joining us. As always, Jackson Hinkle, host of Legitimate Targets, one of our best and most eloquent guests. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls. Up next. Stay tuned. Let's go to our old friend Declan in Dublin, who's online too. Go ahead, Declan.
Right, George. There's a very big protest in the town of Taipei, the last Christian village on the West Bank. If they lose this, they are finished in the Holy Land. I'd like to take the chance to salute Francesca Albanese, who is the greatest woman, I think, of our generation. And the hope is that there are other Francesca Albaneses out there who will do something, because the Western churches, the Catholic Church especially, and the other main churches are doing absolutely nothing for their co-religionists in the Holy Land, just like they did nothing for them in Syria or in Iraq. They
don't even talk about them, never mind do anything. And all these Christian politicians, and all these Christian leaders, and most of the Christian clergy haven't done or said even jack to come to their aid. They're not Christians, most of these politicians. When they say they're Christians, better count your spoons, or better still, count the burning Christian houses.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
It's the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from China. Here's a little taste of what I'll be about across various platforms the next few weeks. Take a look.
I think that's the sign of a school.
The sign of the school.
So there's a picture with school children and Xi Jinping in the middle.
Yeah. This school is called the middle school, but it contains from grade 1 to grade 9.
I see.
Yeah.
And apparently there's a football class on shore. Looking forward to that. This visit to this school, which is a special football school with lessons and football training all the time, with outstanding achievement, by the way, national champions, regional champions, almost at every level, including the girls. It's slain two of the biggest lies that are told about this part of China. First of all of the football heroes in this school, national heroes, are Uyghur people. Secondly, I believe the lie that parents were not allowed to call their children obviously Muslim names. But behind me is Khadija, is Rahmatullah. Behind me is Sefruddin. Behind me is Mehmet. It is a big, shining lie. How much more Islamic a name can you have than that little star, Rahmatullah, out there on the pitch? These liars have been allowed to smear China all over the world, and I'm determined to try and put a stop to it. Cristiano Ronaldo! I do hope that Cristiano does get to see the video, because when I asked this huge group of footballers, boys and girls, who was better, Ronaldo or Messi, not a millisecond was wasted. The entire cohort said Cristiano Ronaldo. Should Prince Andrew have his title removed, yes or no? You can vote on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and on my Patreon page. Let's take a call from New York, where John wants to talk about AIPAC. Go ahead, John.
Hey, George. Always a treat to speak with you. I'm a proud student at the Global University, paying tuition monthly on Patreon. We have an election coming up, a New York mayoral election. I don't know if you have been keeping tabs on it, but if you have, I'd be interested in your comments on the New York City mayoral race. Part two is I am noticing more and more politicians in my country absolutely squirm and contort themselves when asked the simple question, do you accept money from AIPAC? And it is really incredible to see the hypocrisy, but I don't even think it can be hidden anymore. I don't think that they can hide behind it, because they're being asked about it more and more. And my question is it the same happening in your country? Thank you.
Well, thanks kindly, John, and for your ongoing support. It's very much appreciated. On the latter point that you made, it doesn't happen on the same scale, at least we think, in Britain, because we have very strict expenditure limits on elections. I mean, if I were running in a parliamentary contest, I would not be able to spend more than about $25,000. Now, your contests are now increasingly costing multi-million dollars, and that money has to be raised from somewhere, and that somewhere is increasingly the lobbies. Not just the Israel lobby, but that's probably preeminent, or maybe second in the overall total. Maybe the National Rifle, the gun lobby, outspends it. I no longer know the exact figures, but the Israel lobby is up there, either first or second. But it's now become such a poisoned chalice in the United States that the AIPAC is beginning to tell donors to send money directly to the candidates rather than through AIPAC, because AIPAC has become a toxic brand. I predict to you that within the next 6 months to a year, AIPAC will wind itself up and will rebrand itself as something else, because it's now a potential guarantee of defeat in many places in the United States if you can be successfully stuck as the recipient of the largesse of the Israel lobby. Israel America has fallen out of love with Israel to a remarkable extent, and not just on the left, but also on the right. Ted Cruz was, where else would he be, in Israel today, some crackpot Christian fundamentalist platform, and he was almost literally weeping at how difficult it is now in the United States to be like him, as an absolute zealot, a believer in supremacy, and not his own supremacy either. I mean, there was a guy, I don't know his name, but a top evangelist Christian in the United States speaking at the same event, who bluntly and openly stated that the Jews and Israel were above all other people in the world, including the United States of America. I mean, they're not trying to hide it anymore. This is ethno-religious, ethno-religio supremacism of a truly absurd level. So I predict that, as I say, that AIPAC will turn into something else quite soon. What the operation of the British state capture by the Israel lobby is very, very much more difficult to discern. I mean, if you're an unknown congressman or woman in the United States and somebody's giving you literally millions of dollars, well, in American politics, with the financial demand of elections and so on, if you have no ballast, if you have no beliefs, if you have no morals, if you have no conscience, and let's face it, most politicians don't, then you're going to take the money and you're going to sing the song. Why the British are singing that song when they can't, can they, be picking up large checks because they'd have to declare them, wouldn't they? It's very much more difficult to discern. As to the New York mayoralty, well, for those not in American politics or not facing or studying this race closely as you and I are, let me just explain. The discredited Andrew Cuomo, who lost the Democrat primary to Mamdani, is nonetheless running as an independent Democrat. Who's Andrew Cuomo? Andrew was the governor of the state of New York until he was sacked for sexual malfeasance and the sexual abuse and harassment of female staff. He's also the guy who murdered many people's grannies by putting them into care homes at the height of the COVID crisis, whereupon a significant number of them perished. And yet he is now the great white hope of the Democratic Party, who are increasingly hoping that this discredited husk of a sexual abuser is elected as the mayor of New York. The crook who is the mayor at the moment, Eric Adams, he's also running. There's a Republican in the race, and Democrats are asking both of them to pull out so that every anti-Mamdani vote can get behind Cuomo. I even saw, observing what I've just told you, some chick that regards herself as a hot chick with Cuomo announcing the formation of Hot Chicks for Cuomo. That's how desperate they are. Now, I've got no illusions about Mamdani, I've got to tell you. I don't think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I have seen his like before. But the issue of Israel-Palestine, on the issue of housing and housing costs in New York, on the issue of wages and the chronically low minimum wage in New York City, on domestic and international issues, he's the best guy in the race. He's not a great guy, but he's the best guy in the race. So for me, if you're going to vote at all in the New York mail day, and I suggest that you should, then you should be voting for Mamdani. Last word to you, John.
I agree with everything that you said. I do not see, I'm heartened by the fact that because of social media and because of people like yourself, I'm 10 years younger than you, George, so I don't know that I'll live to see it. But I don't think there's any way on either side, Democrat, Republican, or whatever, that if you're under 40 and watching what I'm watching, that you're going to put up with this. So I really do believe in my heart, it may take a couple of decades, that the Israeli dominance in my country is going to end. It will end. This cannot last.
I agree with that. John, you're a gentleman and a scholar. Thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Now, you can leave comments if you're watching on YouTube. Just scan the QR code right now and leave a comment on the YouTube stream, as Christine Peach has. Andrew is no prince. He's a mongrel. I think a mongrel is a rather more wholesome dog than him. But Christine, Ramplens01 says China is not communist anymore. It's capitalist. Actually, it's not. But it is a kind of communism that we haven't seen before. It is, as Jackson Hinkle said, a capitalism with Chinese characteristics. It's got a free health service. And I was in a hospital. You'll see it sometime in the next few weeks. I was in a that works miracles for in a relative to some other parts of China, undeveloped place, poorer than the average, maybe much poorer than the average, though rapidly catching up, where the Chinese government have sent doctors and trainers and specialists from all over China. And I mean sent. They didn't ask them. They didn't volunteer. The Chinese government sent these doctors who have probably very much more confidence in richer cities and richer parts of China. But the government in China has decided that this area has to be lifted up, and it has to be uplifted to the same level as the richer parts of China, and all resources are being mobilized to make that happen. Now, that could not happen in a capitalist economy, and the health service wouldn't be free. The school is free, and as you saw today, the schools are turning out fine young men and women by the million. The transportation in China, the infrastructural development in China could not happen if China was a capitalist country. Why does China have 50,000 kilometers of high speed, and boy, I mean high speed rail, and the United States has none? Not exaggerating, I mean zero, not 1 kilometer of high speed rail in the United States, 50,000 in China. America is a capitalist country. China is a socialist country. That's why the state is directing into infrastructure, into dams, highways, high-speed electrification, reforestation, and all the gains and advances that have been made in China are only possible because China is a socialist country. Think about it. If it were not so, why is China outperforming all of the rest of the world by every and any metric? So, sorry, I don't agree with you. Ali Yuzbasioglu says China showed the way for every socialist. Well, it's definitely showed the way for me. I have no compunction as the leader of the Workers' Party of no compunction in saying, I want an economy like China. I want socialism in British characteristics. We don't have to take on board every Chinese custom. We don't have to wear Mao suits, although, as a matter of fact, I like Mao suits and nobody in China wears Mao suits any longer. But in British characteristics, and I think Jackson would say the same, perhaps did say the same, in America, I want an economy like China. State has an important role, a leading role, and where capitalism is equally welcome to ply its trade. It's a mixed economy, but under the direction of the Chinese government. You can become as rich as Croesus in China, and many have. But don't dare think that you can dictate the political course of the country. Now, there's another important difference between us and them. Christine says China, Russia, India, and others do things for their citizens to make life better, while the USA only enriches their oligarchs. And Sean Penfold says China is the economic model for the entire world, bar none. I'm with you on that, Sean. Now look, a big thanks to this week's donors who visited the MOATS.tv website. You've been very generous this week. Nigel Ellis Brown, William Fitch, Yosri Auni, that's O-U-N-I, thanks Yosri, James Glass, and Amira Kataria. Please become a MOATS donor this night and give what you can to support the show. My old friend Donna in Panama wants to talk about the condo in Gaza. Oh, Donna, as the song goes. Hi, Donna. Nice to hear from you again.
Hi. We had a little trouble getting connected, as you were told. And since I know we're pressed for time, and I'm gonna talk very quickly because I thought of a couple of other things. Okay, regarding Gaza, Kushner's Gaza. Number one, it's going to cost a hell of a lot of money to get your business or your home insured in Gaza, because the rage that the world correctly feels will probably inspire some rogue terrorist to drop bombs on it. I mean, that's just the fact. And they're going to need to have very high rates of insurance, number one. Plus, it's going to be a dangerous place to live and do business because it's going to be an obvious target. The other thing is, you mentioned the minister that abused Virginia Roberts, later Virginia Giuffre. Well, it was stated that Epstein and must have passed it on to his friends, or at least some of his friends, became interested in sadomasochism. And there is some kind of sexual practice where some people get off, I guess, both the giver and receiver, of choking the other person, choking the sex partner. And apparently it's very exciting to see this person nearly die in your hands. And Virginia was subjected to this kind of choking, nearly killing her. She was tortured, she was beaten, and she was raped by, allegedly, this morning I heard, Ehud Barak. All she said was he was a minister in the book. But I heard this morning the minister was the ex-prime minister, Ehud Barak. About if there's a possible two-state solution. What are they going to do? Well, Gideon Levy, our good friend from Aretz, Gideon Levy said, no way that they can, he said, I just don't see a way that they can move all those tens or hundreds of thousands of illegal settlers to another part of Israel if they divide up the land, into a Palestinian state, an Israeli state. But our good friend, Colonel Wilkerson, who's very busy, he's not mad at anyone, he's just very, very busy, said that Stalin did some kind of major transfer of the population from one area of the former Soviet Union to another. I don't know. I can't remember what it was about, but I'll bet you know, George, how he did it and who they were and why. And finally, I went to church for the first time in a long time when I was in Edinburgh, and I wore my keffiyeh, and I'm Presbyterian. That's what we call it in the States. It's Church of Scotland in Scotland. And I was very sad to hear in the sermon, there were mentions of people, there were prayers and mentions of people suffering from grief of losing loved ones, suffering from natural disasters, all kinds of suffering. Not one word of mention of those suffering from war or genocide. And that's my talk today.
Well, a brilliant call and touching a really important basis. And I'm really glad you made it to Edinburgh. I'm sorry I wasn't there to receive you. And it's very sad indeed. The Christian churches, at least in Britain, I can't speak for anywhere else, but it's not only the Presbyterians, the Church of Scotland, that has failed. It's all the churches. And since the demise of the late and great Pope Francis, even the Roman Catholic Church has piped down considerably on the issues in Gaza. And I've been to Mass in many places in the United Kingdom. So it's not just one church where even at Christmas time, where the Holy Family are laid out in the stable in where Bethlehem, where Palestine is in front of the altar, there is zero reference. I mean zero reference. The word Palestine, the word Bethlehem is not even mentioned, or at least not mentioned in context. The fact that Bethlehem, that Nazareth, that the footsteps of the Holy Family could not be replicated because of the illegal settlements and illegal walls that now divide Jerusalem and Bethlehem, cannot even get a mention. And it's gutlessness, cowardice. It's not that the clergy doesn't know, it's that the clergy and the hierarchy are gutless cowards, and they will not do what they must know in their hearts Jesus would want them to do, and speak out clearly and unambiguously about the genocide that has been going on. I won't comment on the sexual practice that you described, but it must be the reason for the wounding, physical wounding, never mind psychological, of Virginia Roberts. It must be the reason. I cannot vouch for the fact that the minister concerned who did that to her was Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel. But what I can say is that Ehud Barak is a former head of the Mossad and a former Chief of Staff of the Israeli Army. And what I can say is that Ehud Barak visited Jeffrey Epstein 36 times in 2 years. That's a very close friendship indeed. Thank you, Donna, in Panama. Coming up very shortly, after this short break, is the one and only Colonel Douglas Macgregor, a retired U.S. Army colonel, author, defense and foreign policy consultant, a man who knows everything about war and increasingly everything about international politics. You don't want to miss this interview. I'll be right back. his approval ratings are in the toilet. He won a huge mandate, well less than a year ago, and he's thrown it all away. He has an approval rating of just under 40% now, and a disapproval rating of all the others. There are no don't knows in the issue of Donald Trump. And so he has maximized the number of people who hate him or dislike him, and he has systematically undermined the voting base that formerly liked him. And I don't know whether that is because of his donors, because he's intellectually challenged, because it's of his age. I really don't know.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Should Prince Andrew have his title removed? Get voting. You've got about half an hour left to cast your vote on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and on Patreon. Colonel Douglas Macgregor is a regular guest of ours and our most popular in terms of viewing numbers. And that's because he's a wise man, an ideologue. He doesn't agree with me or you on every matter under the sun, but he does know about war, and he does know about international politics that drives war, and we are increasingly grateful for his time on the mother of all talk shows. Colonel Macgregor, welcome back. There's so many wars, there's not time on the show to cover them all, but undoubtedly the big question, the big enchilada is Donald Trump, the peace president, going to solve the Ukraine war? One day I think he is, the next day I think he's not. In fact, 1 hour I think he is, and the next hour I think he's not. What's your thinking on that?
Now, George, it's good to see you. I'm glad that you're walking free on the streets of Great Britain. I don't think that President Trump is in a position to solve very much of anything. Now, we can talk about some of the constraints on him, but I think what we saw happen with the trip to Budapest was he was surrounded by various people, donors, representatives, people on the Hill, making it clear that they don't want an agreement with President Putin unless it involves Russia's unilateral surrender and humiliation. And so I think President Trump decided it's better to have no agreement than a bad one, and so he stayed home. It's that simple.
This is the anniversary, it's on this day, in fact, of 1962, of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was opining in my monologue about how afraid we all were of nuclear war at that point, averted only by the wisdom of the two concerned. If they'd listened, with all respect to your profession, to the American generals, we wouldn't be talking here now. We might have had World War III. But Kennedy was level-headed and knew that if he had followed the advice of his generals, that it would lead to nuclear war. And I just don't think that people appreciate how close we are to nuclear war today. The British just landed Storm Shadow missiles deep inside Russia. Russia is now within its rights to retaliate against Britain, which is itself a nuclear power, and which is itself a part of a bigger nuclear alliance. These are very, very dangerous times, Colonel.
Oh, they are. There's no question about it. The problem in the West is very simple. We have absolutely, continually, grossly underestimated Russian military power. We have ignored anything that the Russian leadership has said for at least 2 decades. Whenever they have made a plea for understanding their position vis-a-vis NATO, why they did not want NATO on their borders, why they would react strongly against such action. We simply refuse to listen. And right now, I think President Trump privately would like to see an end to this, but President Trump is unwilling to do what is required to end the conflict, and that is to admit a couple of things. First of all, President Biden's decision to build up the Ukrainian military for a major war against Russia was a serious mistake. Not only a mistake, it was a strategic error. President Trump knows that to be the case, but for some reason he's reluctant to say that. And again, I blame this on his donors. And so he's decided that since he cannot formally disengage from the conflict in Ukraine, he's going to simply turn away from it. The problem is he cannot abdicate his responsibility as the leader of NATO to the Europeans because of what you have just described. The leadership in London, in Paris, in Berlin, and I would argue Warsaw, is irresponsible. They don't know what they're doing. They're playing a very dangerous game. They are pushing harder than ever against the Russians. It is only President Putin's determination to avoid a war with NATO and the United States that keeps it from growing much worse. Now, I don't know what the future holds, but I think that President Trump, as I said, would like to turn away from it and focus elsewhere, primarily the Middle East, where I think he believes the ceasefire is meaningful. I think it's an illusion, and nothing has fundamentally changed in the Middle East. But he believes that for the moment. And at the same time, he's turning his attention to Venezuela, thinking that he can simply ignore what happens in Eastern Europe. I don't think he can, and I agree with you. What the British have just done, which is not new, they've done these things in the past, is very, very dangerous. But again, Putin is the adult in the room. The people in London, Paris, and Berlin and Warsaw cannot be characterized as adults because if they were, they would not do these things. It makes no sense.
But if can only do these things based on, and this is the conundrum that you're describing, it's only the guarantee that makes NATO meaningful at all. Britain has no army, has no navy. Its navy is stuck together by glue, and its army, if you take out all the clerks and haters and medics and the rest, would be scarcely over 40,000 strong. The same with the armies on the European mainland. They cannot go to war with Russia and can only threaten war with Russia on the premise the United States would have to. Trump, I agree with you. I think Trump wants this war to end. The barking chihuahuas and poodles and dachshunds in Europe very definitely don't. But if Trump doesn't break with them and put his foot down, this is going to go on and potentially get worse and worse, isn't it?
I agree with you, unless you remove the people who are governing in London, Paris, and Berlin in particular. And I think it's reaching the point in all three countries where the population genuinely needs to do that. They need to demand change in government. Now, in the meantime, sadly, I think President Trump is demonstrating that he is very much a politician, contrary to what he wants everybody to think, because he wants to be a little bit pregnant. He doesn't really want to bring the child to fruition and take responsibility for it, but he'd like to be pregnant. In other words, he wants to be popular with everyone, he wants to get along with everyone, and he doesn't understand exactly what you described. He is the de facto leader of NATO. And if they want to break with him by insisting on carrying on this war, then he should put them in that position. Because there's no reason for us to keep 100,000 U.S. troops from Lithuania to Romania sitting around, training from time to time, eating lots of food and costing lots of money. They are not going to march into Ukraine. They are not going to fight Russia. That's quite clear. So he ought to get them out and bring them home and be done with it. But he's reluctant to take that decision. And remember, again, he's not someone who studies the issues. He doesn't really understand the roots of the war in Ukraine. I don't think he really cares. I think he thinks it's a bad thing and would like to end it. But unless you understand why it happened to begin with, how can you end it in a way that makes sense? The Russians want to settle this thing. They want a new security arrangement for Europe. It makes infinite sense. We should have had that 20, 30 years ago. But instead of pressing ahead with that, he's backed away. You can't do that, but that's exactly what he's done. It's like having no one in the locomotive, and the locomotive is headed down the tracks at high speed. It's not a good answer.
What's the reason for these people that crowded round Trump and let it be known in no uncertain terms that they did not want peace? Is it, as Tucker Carlson has been saying, that this has been a money laundering operation, that not just the military-industrial complex, but the politicians themselves have enriched themselves with corrupt practices with all these billions, tens, scores of billions of dollars washing around unaudited?
The great Lou Dobbs once said that America has the best government money can buy. And I think we know that to be the case. We're currently governed by a collection of billionaires. You can call them oligarchs, whatever you like. And President Trump has demonstrated routinely since he took office that his administration is, quote unquote, a very transactional administration. You would like to be the ambassador to Lower Slobovia, pay your $2 million to me, and you get to be the ambassador to Lower Slobovia. Tell me what you want, and if you pay enough money, I'll see to it that you get it. That's effectively what's been going on. And these billionaires are the same ones that want to subjugate the Middle East. They want to create Israeli hegemony backed by U.S. military power all over the region. They want the same thing in Ukraine. They want to destroy Russia. Why these people are committed to these things would take us an hour to explore. But the point is, the same people pushing these bad wars and bad policies are at work in Venezuela. They're at work in the Middle East. They're at work in Eastern Europe. There's no easy way to get around it. And President Trump's problem is he owes his position in the White House to these people.
Yeah, but he is there and he can't run again. So, eaten bread is soon forgotten, as the Irish say. It's a bit of a puzzle that he's not more interested in what his legacy will be. I mean, if you could leave office as the guy who halted the potential for World War III in Europe, that would be a very considerable feather in your cap.
But he is preeminently concerned about optics, the way things look. And he believes that if he states it, it's true. If he tells someone to do something, he believes they're off and doing it. My experience with him was that he doesn't realize that simply because he tells somebody to do something, they may or may not do it. And if they don't do it, he doesn't hold anybody accountable. There's no price to be paid. You can't run a government that way. You can't run anything that way. Where there is no accountability, there's no performance. He doesn't seem to understand that. But he wants to feel good. He likes others around him to feel good. His favorite thing is to be on permanent campaign. He loves to talk to large audiences and interact with them. What he doesn't like to do is sit down, listen to a detailed briefing of some importance. Now, there is some good news. It looks like he was briefed on the Tomahawk, its limitations, the small numbers available, the problems with it. And he finally decided, well, perhaps I shouldn't press ahead with that. Everybody thinks it's because President Putin told him that this would sour Russian-American relations, and it was viewed in Moscow as an escalation in the conflict, and they would have to respond. But I don't think that was it. I think he was rather surprised when he discovered we don't have that many, and the ones that we have are only available to be launched from the ground for the Ukrainians. And if we do that, we have to put our soldiers, our personnel, if you will, on the ground, executing the mission, planning it, and so forth. I think he finally decided this is a bad idea. Well, that's a good thing. I'm damn glad he decided that because it was a very stupid idea. But that's not enough. And when President Putin talks to him, President Putin likes to think of him as the leader of NATO. And he's very frustrated because he can't do that, because there's no evidence that President Trump will put his foot down. Just as there's very little evidence that he's going to do anything to restrain Mr. Netanyahu, we don't see much evidence he's going to restrain Starmer or Macron or Merz. But he should, given his position. But he doesn't do it.
I was in Moscow briefly on my way to China, 24 hours or so. There's a lot of what you might call Trump-supporting Americans there, a considerable number, in fact. I won't embarrass them by adumbrating, but the signs are that Trump really does want to improve relations with Russia. It's perfectly possible to imagine sanctions on Russia being lifted in America before anywhere else. It's perfectly possible to imagine RT being back on the air in America while still being banned in Europe. These are strange times, Colonel.
Listen, George, President Trump wanted to normalize relations with Russia. He sent a team to Saudi Arabia shortly after he was elected, and they had good meetings in Saudi Arabia. The opportunity to normalize relations with Russia is there. Now, I don't know how much longer that's going to last if things get worse in Ukraine, which I'm afraid at this point they may. So I agree with you 100%. The problem for President Trump is this. He was elected preeminently to restore economic productivity and prosperity at home in the United States. That's what everyone that voted for him wants. That hasn't changed. No one voted for an invasion of Venezuela. No one voted for extending the war in Ukraine. And no one is interested in fighting Israel's war of conquest in the Middle East. That's all nonsense. So where is the disconnect? The disconnect is back to where we started. Money. Everything's about money and power. Money breeds power and influence. He's made promises to get where he is. He's trying to deliver, and it's disastrous for him. He needs to stand up and say, I'm the president of the United States. I have obligations to the American people. This is what I promised. I've got to deliver. Well, that would require him to shed his overseas commitments completely. He would be compelled to sign off on the best deal that he could get for the Ukrainians. He would be compelled to tell Mr. Netanyahu, I can't support your genocidal practices in Gaza or the West Bank or anywhere else. And by the way, whatever is wrong in Venezuela, I'm perfectly willing to deal with Maduro. Maduro has offered us a stake in his oil and gas industries, and I'm going to take it. That's what he would do. He's obviously not a free agent.
Let's talk about some of these other theaters then, Colonel. We know that the Holy Land is a place of miracles, but it would be the mother of all miracles if Jared Kushner, the property developer, was able to deliver us from a conflict that has lasted now for 77 years, a conflict in which the American and British, for that matter, political systems have become deeply corrupted by one side's lobby. It would be a miracle if Tony Blair, as Governor General of Gaza, it would be a miracle if Blair was able to deliver peace, certainly peace with justice. I might be, I wasn't ever at a university. I left school at 16 to work in a factory. It might just be beyond me or above me, but I honestly cannot see where they think this is going. It's not going to solve the problem. The Palestinians are still there. Their rights, their legal demands are still extant and now unsatisfiable. So how does all this end up with peace?
It doesn't. And that's my bottom line. I think the truth is as following. When this is over, you will have either Palestine or Israel, but you won't have both. And I've spent time in Israel. I actually like the Israelis personally. I thought very highly of their senior military leaders, but they've made it very clear that the only outcome that is acceptable to them is for Israel to grow larger and stronger at the expense of the Palestinians, their homes, and their position inside Israel. They have reasons that are demographic and reasons of strategy. The Israeli state believes that they are most secure when the rest of the region is balkanized, when it is divided and people are killing each other. They like that because they translate that into security for Israel. I see no evidence for that mentality changing. And I think people have to understand that I think still, even at this point, at least 80% of the Israeli population supports that. They may not like Mr. Netanyahu. I don't know of anybody who does. But that doesn't make any difference. He's viewed as a man of intelligence, as a man who is ruthless enough to make all of this happen. And we are regarded as the subordinate vassal of Greater Israel. And they expect us to support them regardless of whatever they do. Thus far, that's exactly what we've done.
Well, I watched a video of Ted Cruz today. Of where else would he be? In Israel. And another pastor from Christians for Israel or some other non sequitur like that. And the message was that Israelis, Jews actually, the pastor said, Israelis, Ted Cruz said or implied, are not just the chosen people, the superior people, and the rest of us, including the United States of America, explicitly stated at this conference today, are above the rest of us, and their interests must prevail. It's difficult for sane, rational people to compute all that, Colonel. How did we get to a stage where one of the most senior politicians in America, Ted Cruz, is openly stating that it's not America first, it's Israel first?
Worshipping at the altar of Israel is financially very rewarding, George. I can't emphasize that enough. When we talk about these wars, you have on the one hand this sort of money laundering scheme that Tucker Carlson rightly described, but you have to look at the bank accounts. There are some investigations underway of senior senators who've received millions of dollars as a result of this, what we call laundering operation. But it's more than that. If you're a senior officer in the military and you're a strident advocate for Israel and whatever it wants, which amounts to perpetual conflict with its neighbors in the region to establish their hegemony, when you retire, you are rewarded by membership in financial firms in New York City, by joining boards of directors in banks, by being appointed officers in the defense industries, by becoming enshrined as a notable personality or expert in one of the so-called think tanks in Washington. And all the think tanks are owned by the same people. They're not think tanks, they're advocacy tanks. But the point is that everyone has figured out if you want to get rich and you want to be rewarded, be on the right side. And so that's why there is no shortage of people willing to step forward and do this. The danger for someone like President Trump is that there is an inexhaustible supply of sycophantic generals who will tell him whatever he wants to hear because it's financially rewarding to do so. The problem is at some point, it's going to become militarily disastrous and strategically catastrophic for us. When that happens is anybody's guess, but I think we're closer to it now, as you mentioned at the outset, than perhaps we have been in decades.
My God, I wish you were the president. Colonel, one last question. I suspect that I'm more sympathetic to the Venezuelan and revolution than you are. But we may share.
That's not true. That's not true. You know, that's not true, George. You know, there was a Macgregor involved with Simon Bolivar. He was kind of a rogue, but he had quite a reputation. He fought in the revolution.
Well, I think you and I might need to head down there together. We could be the new Scots guards of the Venezuelan
Well, there's
revolution.
no reason, George. There's no reason for a war with Venezuela. This is nonsense. There's no reason to invade that place. And if we go into it and we're brutal and we kill people and we do damage, Venezuela is going to become the rallying point for millions of people all over Latin America who hate us already.
Yeah.
We'll see 100,000 paramilitaries from Brazil and Colombia pour into the place. It'll be a never-ending disaster. It'll go on forever. You know, the big problem we have is the same one. Back in 1960, I think it was late 64, early 65, the Secretary of Defense McNamara called the Supreme Commander of NATO, an Army four-star, and he asked him, General, how long do you think it'll take us to get the 101st Air Mobile Division into Vietnam? He said, oh, I don't think it'll take very long to get them in. The question is, how long will it take us to get them the hell out? Well, of course, Secretary McNamara didn't like that answer and said thank you and hung up the phone. That's our problem. No one ever asked the question, okay, why are we going in? And then saying, well, this is the mission. Can you explain the mission? How are we going to do it? What's it going to look like when we complete it? There's no emphasis on that. The emphasis is just get everyone in. Push everybody in. We'll figure it out once we're on the ground. It's a catastrophe. It doesn't work.
Colonel Macgregor, you're an officer, a gentleman, and a scholar. Thanks very much for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. What an extraordinary interview. What an extraordinary man. I'm not joking. I wish Colonel Macgregor was in the White House. Let's go straight to calls because time is running. It's about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning for me, by the way, and I haven't been to bed. So if I look a little less handsome than normal, it's fatigue. Let's go to my good friend Terence in Reading on Prince Andrew. What have you got to say about him, Tel?
Good evening, Mr. Galloway, and I hope you have a good night's sleep after this. Two words, actually, big and small. And when I look at these so-called royals with a small R, they never had a mortgage in their life, never worked, flew in from Germany when Europe were kicking them out, and that's what we landed with. And given the fact I don't even want to talk about him, he's a dirty, stinking organism like the rest of them. And it is the anniversary just gone of Aberfan, where a man who covered up Aberfan, part of the big scheme, was given a knighthood. So there's power against powerless. And you in your opposition with the Workers' Party of Great Britain and Zara Sultana and Mr. Corbyn, hopefully, can now thunder on and get on to this new thing that's been dragging on for about 10 to 20 years, the grooming gang so-called scandal. The policeman has just resigned, a senior policeman has resigned. He said, I can't do it because they're all making things up. And this is from a policeman is probably above and beyond reproach, part of the big system which keep the small people down. And I wanted your opinion on that, where to proceed on that in the British context. And hopefully we can, go after that, because small will always be big if we stay together. What say you, Mr. Galloway?
Well, I very much agree. The minorities in Britain are there to stay. Only a lunatic thinks otherwise. There are sons of these minority communities, although it's often forgotten that well over 80% of Britain is white and so indigenous. But the minorities are there to stay, so we all get along, because the alternative to getting along is to have trouble and breaches of social peace country, and only a fool would want that. So what's the best way of getting on? Well, it's not to traduce each other or to disrespect each other's traditions and religions and so on. That's what Britain used to be famous for. And we have to get back to those days. We need a bit more common sense socialism, as the Workers' Party calls its programme, and a bit less rabble-rousing racism, as is evident on, let's call it, the Robinson-Farage right. There's going to be no mass deportations, so we might as well start working out how we're going to get along with each other. We are against, as you know, illegal immigration, completely against it. As Jackson Hinkle correctly pointed out, as someone in roughly the same political position as me, that the only people who mass immigration are the capitalists, because they get a reserve army of labour. They get cheap labour waiting outside the factory to depress wages and keep living standards down. So we're opposed to that. But for the people that are legally in Britain and who look like Jude Bellingham or look like Marcus Rashford, he's doing well, by the way, at Barcelona, they're here to stay. That's not going to change. So what can see, and I'm very glad about that, because I lived in Britain when it was a sausage, egg and chips, almost all white community, and where the music was Billy Fury on the jukebox. Not that I'm against Billy, by the way. The last time I said that, I got a lot of complaints. But Britain, as it is today, as it looks today, is the way it's always going to look. And you have to face that fact. Now, on the issue of grooming gangs, I hate a groomer, a sexual abuser, more if he's a Muslim, more if he's going to the mosque on a Friday, if not more often than that, professing a love of God. I hate him more if he's an abuser, not less. I hate a priest more if he's an abuser, as very many have been, as you know, Terence. I hate him more because, as a man of God, such sin is even more venal than it would be otherwise. I hate a Boy Scout leader or a football team coach more if he's an abuser, not less. So, wherever we find the abuse of underage girls, wherever we find sexual molestation, we need to crack down hard on it, without fear or fail. Now, I don't need to tell you, the vast majority of paedophiles in Britain are white people. I've been a victim of one myself when I was a child, when there was not a black or brown face in the city. So nobody needs to tell me about the lifelong damage that is done by these people. I know it from personal experience. So let's not allow the legitimate concerns of parents, and I'm one of them, with 5 young children, with a 6th child who is the mother of 5 young children herself. Who more than me is revolted by the sexual abuse and molestation of children? Let's not turn it into a race thing. Let's not turn it into a religious thing, because that's just cheap opportunism that's going to backfire and cause a loss of social peace in our country. And our country has more than enough problems as it is without a loss of social peace. Thanks, Terence, for the opportunity to say that. Now, the podcast, wow, what can I say about it? We are in the top 10 in Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Botswana, Mauritius, and Hong Kong this week. Top 10. We're in the top 20 in Croatia, Botswana, and in the top 40 in India. That is amazing. India is 1.5 billion people. Can you imagine how many podcasts there are in India? And we are in the top there. You can download the MOATS podcast and the QR code on your screen now. Of course, you can also listen to the weekly podcast via MOATS.tv website. And once you've listened, please don't forget to leave a review and rate it too. It helps us to grow and more people will know about it. Let me talk to Gerardo in the great city of Glasgow about Jackson Hinkle. Gerardo.
Hi, George. Good evening. Great. Wow, so much.
Good evening, sir.
I was completely hypnotized, but wonderful to see Jackson Hinkle on. Jackson can talk about immediately starting off about the Chan's bathroom, gender baldness. He's got, like, you know, the ASM, you know, the Strangajumia.
Yeah, he's a sound man, is Jackson.
Oh, really, he's remarkable, and may he have a long, long, long career. Although him and Max Blumenthal win podcast, I cannot get away from the screen, but perhaps neither of them should go to visit a certain in the Mediterranean for the time being, so we say.
Quite right. I don't think they will.
Well, I hope not. I would stop them if I could, you know, and think, let's go to Monaco or Barcelona. Let's also in the Mediterranean. You know, right, George. So our fellow Scotsman, Colonel Macgregor, is a big fan of Napoleon, and sometimes a lot of people don't get it. But
I saw the bust of Napoleon behind him. Yeah.
But Colonel Macgregor, he is quite a piece of work, you know. He is very well studied in von Clausewitz, for example. He speaks pretty good German. Have you ever heard Colonel Macgregor speak German?
No, but I know he was going to be the ambassador. He was supposed to be the ambassador in Germany. It's a pity that he didn't join the diplomatic.
It's wonderful. You can hear the American accent, but it still is wonderfully clear German he speaks, yeah. It's kind of like, unfortunately, when I speak Spanish, people think I'm Mexican because that's where I learned, you know, in Southern California and in Mexico, but never mind, they'll never think the guy speaks Spanish with a Scottish accent. They think I sound like a Mexican. So, Colonel Macgregor being a big fan of Napoleon, among being a great gentleman, I mean, he really is some piece of work. Colonel Macgregor and Jeffrey Sachs, I mean, they just show that, you know, America does produce statesmen. Colonel Macgregor quoted Napoleon once, anyway, it's here from Napoleon. It was, let China sleep, because when she awakes, the world will tremble.
Yeah, very good. And poor Napoleon's royal jewels were nicked in a 7-minute heist. It must have been Inspector Clouseau in charge of the security at the Louvre that day. I suspect that Zelensky, by the way, when I saw the CCTV footage, that T-shirt and those elevators were a bit of a giveaway for me. And Queen Eugenie, or Empress Eugenie's throne was tossed in the gutter. They didn't even want it. It's £100 million worth of stolen in an instant in the Louvre. It tells you everything about today's France, really, doesn't it? Thanks very much, Gerardo. Great call. Big shout out to tonight's top donors who've been on to the MOATS.tv website, as I know you all will be once we come off the air. Alfred McDaniel, Dennis Freeman, Pedro Gomez, Carlos Fernandez, and Richard Sellers. Please, thanks to all of you, please check out our MOATS.tv website, even if you can only leave £1, $1, or €1. Now look, here is the 100th appearance on the mother of all talk shows by the legend Simon from Weaponized News. Congratulations, man. We have benefited greatly from your wisdom over those 100 calls. What have you got for us tonight?
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and also to your worldwide audience. It is a great honour to be with you on this 100th of occasion. I should, however, point out that it really wasn't necessary for you to go all the way to China in order to celebrate. So otherwise, thank you. The reason for my call today is to illuminate the audience about the latest decision in regards to the occupied Palestinian territories from the International Court of Justice, which occurred today. This was in response to a legal question that was posed to them by the United Nations General Assembly in December of last year. And in particular, it was to clarify the Israeli obligations to UN organizations and other humanitarian groups who might be seeking to assist in the alleviation of the suffering of the Palestinian people, particularly in relation to the conflict in Gaza. And they've come out with a very, very strong advisory opinion. One noticeable exception being the vice president, who is the judge from Uganda, as we have previously noted, seems to believe that we are on the end of times and it is her God's given mission to protect the state of Israel. So as in previous judgments, she was the lone voice against the otherwise unanimous majority. But it's very, very significant in the type of things that they've ruled on, specifically when you consider that there are legal steps being taken by the Knesset and the Israeli government to further the annexation of the West Bank in a very quick manner. So they've reiterated, the ICJ has, the need for the protection of aid workers. And in this, they're talking not only about UN officials, but also humanitarian workers and members of other non-governmental organizations who obviously are trying to do good works in that area. And they've specifically said that they should not be targeted, which, as we've seen with the World Central Kitchens workers, with the British security guards with them, that most undoubtedly has happened in the past, along with other housing for Médecins Sans Frontières and other organizations seeking to provide relief. They've come out very strongly in favor of the United Nations Relief Works Agency, obviously founded in 1949, given Security Council approval in 1950, which has been updated and extended many, many times, and pushed back hard against the Israeli suggestion that that organization is, along with you, me, and everyone else, an agent of Hamas. So that has put a bit of a spoke in their works there. The issue there that they've focused on has been its long-standing presence in the region, its authorization both by the General Assembly and the United Nations Security Council, and the large presence and storied track record that it has had. And it's specifically pointed out that that extends not only to food aid, but also the schools, the health clinics, and the hospitals that it's primarily responsible for running. So those are the type of institutions where we're repeatedly being told that they're atop a mass of tunnels, and then it turns out that they're from some Scottish archaeological program. So they've obviously been paying attention to developments in that regard. They've also knocked back the assertion from the Israelis that UNRWA couldn't be trusted because they were infiltrated with Hamas agents. And they've pointed out that that has been scrupulously investigated by the oversight body responsible for UN organizations, and that the people that strong suggestions had been made against were all instantly dismissed, even without things being comprehensively proven against them. It's interesting that the Israeli government, in the form of their foreign minister today, has come out, completely rejected every single aspect of the advisory opinion, whilst the Vice President of the United States is present in Israel today, whilst the Citizens United Friends of Israel, Kufi, and Pastor Hagee are indeed having their annual meeting. But somewhat unrelated to that, the Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Netanyahu, went so far in greeting J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, to participate in the Days of Destiny during his time in Israel. So maybe there are some very large announcements that will be shortly forthcoming. And so going back
many
to
people,
the...
many people fear them. Many people fear them, Simon, and that one of those might well be the beginning of yet another war with Iran. I'm cutting you short on your 100th appearance only because it is now 4 o'clock in the morning for me, and Gayatri will be up in a minute with the social media roundup. Thanks. 100 not out, another boundary. Quick break, and then it's my good wife, Gayatri, who is a superstar here in China, let me tell you. Stay tuned. Let's take a call from Ontario, where someone wants to fight with me. Oh dear, that sounds fearsome. Gerasimo, what have you got to say for yourself?
Hi, George. The name means the old wise one, and I'm a little bit older than you. I just want to comment on the fact that you tend to exaggerate numbers. For example, you said that 100 million indigenous people were killed in North America. Maybe you meant North America and South America.
No, stop. If you're going to upbraid me, you're going to have to quote me correctly. I said from Canada to Chile. That's not North America. Go on.
The figure by David Smith from the University of Houston is that the maximum amount of people that were killed due to disease and colonial settler fascism was 65 million people, not 100 million people.
You say 65 million. I say 98 million. I have my sources. You've got yours. 65 million is one hell of a lot of people killed by colonialism in the Americas. Can we agree on that?
Oh, absolutely. It's awful. And it continues to this day with this horrible fascist, psychopathic regime in Israel. This is beyond imagination. Netanyahu is a psychopath. And I'm a retired psychiatrist, and I would know what a psychopath is. And he is a psychopath. And the whole Israeli nation is sick with
Now, don't exaggerate, Gerasimo. That's the very sin you accuse me of. No, look, it was once said of me that I cannot see a sparrow without hailing it as an eagle. I cannot look at a blackbird without denouncing it as a vulture. I'll accept that I can sometimes get a bit carried away and be the opposite of economical with the actuality. That's true. But do you realize that you came on here to say that only 65 million people were killed by colonialism in the Americas amongst the indigenous, whereas I claim it's 98? Many people would think you were quibbling, Gerasimo.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Gayatri, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, so I won't be taking you for chips after this show ends. But you have been such a hit here in China. Well, frankly, sometimes the crowds are rushing to you because you're beautiful and because you're charismatic and because you are telling the truth about China. So what's rattling on social media, and what do you think of the show so far here in China?
Wonderful show, wonderful setting. Hope the audience is happy. China, here we are. Xinjiang, here we are. Just to place it on the map for the audience at home, we are in the far northwestern part of China, above the province of Tibet, and we are bordering with the countries of Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Pakistan. I mean, this area is so huge. It's 1/6 of the total territory of China. It's spanning 1.6 kilometers square meters. I mean, it's huge.
1.6 million?
Yes.
Wow.
We're surrounded by
There's a lot of desert. Yeah.
Desert. We have a dry grassland, mountains. I mean, it's a very special climate. I mean, the highest point in Xinjiang is almost 9,000 meters above sea level.
We're quite high now. I mean, I can feel it in terms of, breathing.
Breathing, and the desert has quite an effect on the city.
Yeah,
it's just incredible.
Quite a bit of sand sometimes in the air.
Incredible, yeah. And the lowest point in Xinjiang is 155 meters below sea level. So it's really diverse. It's diverse in its geology and also in its people. We've seen around us, all the people that we meet are of all kinds of backgrounds. The majority, obviously, Uyghur. Now, this part of China has been under the rule of all kinds of peoples and empires. And in the 18th century, it became a part of the Qing dynasty.
In China, so since the 1700s.
Yes, correct. And then it became part of the Republic of China. And then since 1949, the People's Republic of China. Let's dive in with one of the facts that we are debunking and have debunked in our short stay thus far. In 2020, the Associated Press did a report saying that the Chinese government has draconian measures to cut rates amongst the Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities, abortion through sterilization. Well, we went to the biggest hospital in Kashgar, here in Xinjiang.
To the maternity ward?
Well, we were given a tour, and then, as is my interest, I asked about the maternity ward, and there we were taken to the maternity ward. And how wonderful it was to see there. We were actually looking at a screen that was displaying all the babies born in the past 48 hours. And it was a long list. And then we met one of the midwives who had delivered 2 babies that day alone. And then how fortunate were we that we were able to visit one of these newborn babies. We went to see the newborn baby, we met the mother, the father, the grand. So in this area, it's an average of 2 to 3 children, which is obviously different from the rest of China.
Of China, negative birth rate.
Negative. So this is not just from recent years. When I was here 16 years ago, I was with a Muslim Chinese who also had 2 children. So, and if you look at the statistics, I mean, in 1947, the population of Xinjiang was 4 million. And 5 years ago, 2020, it was 25. So, I don't know. That's one lie.
Well, the head of the hospital proved to us that the rate of increase in the birth rate last year amongst the Uyghur population was 60%. 60% increase. It's fallen off a bit. It's only 45% increase this year. It's one of many lies. And we've been debunking them to each other over the last couple of days, and we're going to have to do it on a much wider basis.
Yes, we will. And of course, our audience is patient enough to wait for our final edits. But here we are, for example, on screen, it's showing you talking to the hospital director and one of the doctors in one of the campuses of this hospital. And in there, we were taken to the R&D department, which is very significant. You know, China has invested so much in their research and development, allowing them to develop, to create, and to all their equipment and all their robots right here.
Yeah. I mean, I found it difficult to watch because I don't like these things. But we watched an operation for prostate cancer being conducted by a doctor 5,000 kilometers away by robot surgery. 5,000 kilometers. He was sitting on someone's backside and the patient survived.
He survived. The operation was successful and the patient survived.
Yeah.
Well, this trip in general has been so very reflective to me, and I see and I recognize, I find so many similarities with my own country, Indonesia, in terms of its propaganda, arguments and accusations. You know, they say the weak different ethnicity to the rest of China, the Han Chinese. Well, it's like 4,000 kilometers away from Beijing. I mean, it's a 6-hour flight. That's how far the distance is. Well, if you travel from West Indonesia to Indonesia, you are going to see a difference. And in Indonesia, the difference in appearance between the ethnicities are far more stark than they are here. So then they say that in Xinjiang, the Uyghurs, Islam is suppressed, and that the parents cannot name their children with Muslim names, right? So in your video, you have already debunked this, because when we were at the school today, we met Khadija, we met Aisha, we met Ainur.
We met at least 10 Aishas. Aisha is the number one name here. And you couldn't get a more religiously significant name for Muslims than Aisha.
Exactly, correct. In comparison, during a dictatorship, the Chinese minority were not just forbidden Chinese name, they had to change their name. So the ethnic Chinese minority in Indonesia, who already had their Chinese name, had to change it into Javanese names. And their religion was forbidden until the 30-year dictatorship was finished, and the Confucianism was officially recognized as a religion in the Indonesian constitution. So talk about propaganda, right? Indonesia is not as big a bigger threat to the West as China is today. So no wonder. One very interesting fact, this fact that people are so different within this country, different religion, different ethnicity, different languages, does of course we have to separate them into independent countries. I mean, what would that mean? How would that look like? Even for Spain, closer to home, even for the UK, you've been through. So what are these separatist movements all about? Well, around the time that the separatist movement started in the Xinjiang region, which is in the 1990s, is around the same time as well that they discovered oil and mineral reserves. And China's largest natural gas producing region is here.
There's very important new work. I haven't had time to study it carefully enough to pronounce upon it, but a man called, I think it's Nuri Vitachi, put up some new documents and new revelations that our old friend, the British state, was intimately and deeply involved in the separatist project here in Xinjiang. I'm going to study it, and I'm going to reveal as much about it as I possibly can. It won't shock or surprise you that the British are up to their neck in this perfidious Albion affair. Anything else, Gayatri?
Well, I believe we have another caller on the line. I have so much more, of course.
Yeah.
But I'll have to...
I mean, I've never... that's probably the most eloquent and best segment that you've ever done on the Mother of All Talk Shows, and it's 11 minutes past 4 in the morning.
Goodness gracious.
So well done, and let's hear this. It's the legend Erobos in New York for the last call. Erobos, welcome.
Salubrious salutations, Mr. G, Clan Galloway, great guests, like really a stellar program and show, because there's always a program when the Workers' Party is involved. That was a Freudian slip. I don't think the People's Party exists anymore. The lady Gayatri, Mrs. Gayatri Galloway, you know, as a Uyghur princess, she would have made the Mongols proud, right? I think the great Khans would have been highly impressed with her. You know, I could see her moving up in that social circle. it's interesting how, you have an Andrew that's nefarious, and in New York State, we also have an Andrew that's nefarious. So imagine both of those two getting together. Just to move on about Dr. Haladwan, Haladwan, the handcuffs they had on her, and I know this from experience, the handcuffs they had on her indicate dangerous felon status. Those are not, they could have put her in zip ties or something else, but they wanted to drive home the point that she's dangerous and she should be humiliated, right? So those handcuffs are very significant, and they have a larger pair for the ankles, and they just wrap you in a chain like a slave. So it was it was on purpose why they were doing this, and something Garland said in his excellent hosting, and on that note, I'm glad that you all are still up to host, because you could have easily just say, hey, Scott Ritter, host this for me, I got to go to bed, but you pulled through and you powered through and you're both there. Clan Galloway, and of course, shout out to Jai the Magnificent, first of her name, and the MOATS staff. So he mentioned that Russia could take a hit, and I thought about that. As an individual warrior like yourself, like Garland, like myself, and other people who are not afraid to take a hit, we suffer individually. But if Russia takes a hit, it's dozens, maybe hundreds of people get killed. And that's sort of the point I was trying to drive home with him. And finally, because I know time is always against us, I'm going to finish a little differently. I had the best laugh all week watching Keir Starmer and the guy from Pakistan, Omar Sharif, Rashid Sunak, whatever his name is, completely in his obeisance mode. And the look Trump was giving him, right? It reminded me of one of my favorite songs of all time. Tonight's the night, completely. You give your love so sweetly. Tonight's the night of love is in your eyes. But will you love me tomorrow? So that's what Trump was thinking, right? Just looking at him, and
exactly.
Yeah, that's
very good.
Absolutely beautiful as always, Robots, and to a 9:15 p.m. close in London, but a 4:15 close here in China. It was one of the most successful clips that we have ever produced. When I called him a shoeshine boy, it went completely viral across the whole world, particularly in Pakistan, but actually across the whole world. Many millions of people have viewed that. I'm glad that you enjoyed it too. Will you still love me tomorrow? Well, I know that Gayatri will. I hope you will be at the next show, which is
Sunday.
I've lost track of the days, lost track of the time, and don't even know where I am. Not because it's Joe Biden, but because it's 4:16 in the morning. Thanks for joining us. I do think it was a marvelous show. So night from her, and good night from me.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.